But Tyler, if they're drinking, never drive. Not just over the holidays, but never. And we appreciate that SGI has come on board as a partner of the Recovery Hour. And it was made very clear to us that SGI was never telling people not to drink. It was to not drive if you're drinking, right? It's usually your message year round.
Yeah, that's right. What we talk about, and we talk about separating the act of drinking and driving or using drugs and driving, any kind of impairment. If you are using drugs, if you're using alcohol, it could be legal drugs. Cannabis is not legal now, of course, or illegal drugs, prescription drugs, anything that impairs your ability to safely operate that motor vehicle. We just want you to separate that act from driving. And that's an important message for us to get out. This time of year, as we talked about, the celebrations tend to involve alcohol. And this year is going to look a little different. I think we all can understand that. But we have to still get that message out that impaired driving is something you should never do, and police are going to be spending a lot of time on the roads looking for impaired drivers this month.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I've got a liner here to read, and I will, but it starts with impaired driving is the leading cause of death on Saskatchewan's roads. Now, we've been hearing that message for a long time. It hasn't really changed, but are you telling it's getting a little better?
It's gotten a lot better. I would say now that statistic is still true when you're talking about being the leading cause, but we've seen road fatalities overall come down, and we've also seen impaired driving fatalities and injuries come down significantly. In 2019, we saw the lowest number of impaired driving fatalities in Saskatchewan's history, and we have numbers going back to 1998, and it was the lowest overall number of road fatalities. So we think that that would hold up over the course of the modern era in Saskatchewan since cars have been a thing, right? So we saw 21 people lose their lives last year in impaired driving collisions in Saskatchewan. Now, of course, 21 is 21 too many. There are 0 acceptable impaired driving fatalities, but it's the lowest number that we've seen ever. And if you look at the previous average over the previous decade, that number was more than twice as high. It was 54 people on average lost their lives in impaired driving collisions each year over the previous decade on average. So when you're seeing numbers come down to that extent, and we're also seeing injury numbers coming down, and that might even be a more important and a significant statistical measure, that shows us that we're heading in the right direction. There's still lots of work to do, though.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead, Ren.
What are enforcement numbers like? Like the number of impaired driving arrests? Because fatalities are one thing, but are enforcement, are there fewer or more arrests?
That's actually a great question, and we haven't seen those numbers come down. But what enforcement numbers tell us, and I think you would know this too, Rand, is that it's a measure of enforcement when you see the offenses that police are reporting. And we actually have seen those numbers fairly, I would say, consistent. And even in 2020, we've seen those numbers come up a little bit. Now, does that mean that there are more people driving impaired, or police are just doing a better job of catching them? Because over the past several years, 5 to 6 years in Saskatchewan, we've seen the numbers of traffic enforcement officers increase significantly, and this was an initiative of the provincial government as a result of some special committee on traffic safety recommendations from a number of years ago, as you're probably aware of. We have an additional 120 officers added to traffic enforcement in the province, and of course, impaired driving being one of the leading causes of fatalities on Saskatchewan roads, they're going to be looking for impaired drivers. So they're still catching a lot of impaired drivers. And so drivers need to understand that priority isn't going away. And there's never been a worse time to be an impaired driver. If you're driving impaired, you're more likely than ever to be caught.
And I think there's a significant increase in the stop check program, which has been really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. We see stop checks, and especially during the holiday season, you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see that high visibility stop checks, just a way of reminding drivers that the police are out there. That's coupled with other efforts that may be less conspicuous, that they may be undertaking to track down impaired drivers. The public plays a big role as well with the Report Impaired Drivers program. You see the billboards throughout the province where it says, report impaired drivers, call 911 if you see somebody you suspect is driving impaired. Police get thousands of tips and make hundreds of arrests each year as a result of the Report Impaired Drivers program, which has been around for 10 years now.
I know. I just had a a young woman contacted me and said she had to report her husband impaired because he took off from the house impaired, and she didn't want an accident to happen. So he was a little bit annoyed at her, but he got picked up. And so that kind of thing is really important. And I think the education piece is really valuable, because if people, both for the enforcement and for the awareness, and that Be a Good Wingman program is, I think, a huge benefit, because people typically want to take care of their friends. And if you're impaired, you don't make good decisions. So the decision needs to be made before you go out drinking, who's driving, and hey, if I see you wanting to drive your car and you're impaired, I'm taking your keys or putting you in the headlock or whatever I have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. So that caring about your friends piece, I think, is pretty important too.
Well, a story that you tell about the woman and her husband, I mean, it's not great to see anybody driving impaired, and nobody ever wants to see anybody get arrested, but that's actually the better option than him causing a collision that injures or kills himself or somebody else.
Absolutely.
So it is really important for us all to understand that we all have a role to play in preventing impaired driving.
From one of our viewers, Jamie in Halifax, writes in, he says, watching from Halifax, Roddy, a very good teaching lesson tonight as I lost my license due to impaired driving. It took a long time to get it back. The road was tough. And I appreciate you, Jamie, mentioning that, and I guess cautioning others. What is somebody looking at for a first offense if they are charged with impaired driving over these, at all, but over these holidays?
So if you're talking about a criminal code a charge, if you're looking at immediately at roadside, your vehicle is impounded for 30 days if it's a first offense. Immediately at roadside, your license is suspended. And then, of course, you have to deal with the aftermath of that charge, right? You have to, you're arrested. You may have to go down to the station, although the Saskatoon Police Service just recently implemented a roadside testing unit, so you can take your actual breathalyzer test right there at roadside. So then you have to deal with that charge, right? So you go to court. You might be looking at a fine. You might be looking at jail time, depending on the circumstances, but most likely a fine. And then upon conviction, you're looking at an ignition interlock requirement of 1 year for a first offense. There's a significant financial penalty that you'll have to pay to SGI as well through the Safe Driver Recognition Program. And it doesn't matter how safe your driving record was before that. One impaired driving offense will put you really far back at the bottom of the scale, right?
So I think it's about $3,000 between the fine, the interlock, the impound fees for a first offense.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, like that's just the cost out of your wallet, but like what's the cost to your reputation, to your to your self-esteem? You know, does this cost you your job as a result of not being able to drive anymore, and a criminal conviction? It's the message just has to get out there that, you know, no matter what your reason is for driving impaired, there's never a good reason to drive impaired, and there's always a better option.
Well, I think this opens some eyes for a first offense, and we talked a little bit earlier about repeated impaired charges. What are they looking at there? Yeah,
so you're looking at exponential increases on the fines that are under the criminal code. The ignition interlock for a second offense is 3 years, that requirement. The suspensions are longer as well. And so you just really, once you get into that pattern, it's something you want to escape as quickly as you can. So you want to make sure that you don't have that second offense. And the other thing that we should probably talk about is we're talking about criminal offenses right now, and when people talk about the legal limit, as we were talking about before, it's not 0.8. It's actually 0.4 if you're an experienced driver, because that's when the consequences start. If you get pulled over and you're at 0.5, you might not get charged criminally, but you're still going to get your license suspended for 3 days for a first offense, your vehicle impounded for 3 days, and you'll have to take a weekend a course, a driving without impairment course. Rand is well familiar with those. Yeah. And then on repeat offenses, those consequences all go up. The courses get longer and more intense. The suspensions and the impoundments get longer as well.
And it doesn't take very much alcohol to go over. Like, for most people, 3 drinks in 2 hours is going to put you in between that 0.4 and 0.8 range. And 4 drinks in 2 hours is going to put you over 0.8. So, a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to have a couple and I'll be okay. But that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. And I think the best advice that I've ever heard is somebody said, if you have to question whether you're okay to drive, you shouldn't be driving.
Yeah.
Like, why risk it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you, Tyler, brought some wonderful masks for Rand and I. Be a good wingman, which I will wear proudly. And now's a great time to reiterate that message and pound it home again over the holidays here.
Yeah, the idea about being a good wingman, it's looking after your friends and your family. Yeah. And as you mentioned before, when you're impaired, you're not making good decisions. Yeah. So we talk about the importance of planning a safe ride home and doing that before you go out. Don't wait to the end of the night. You've had a few. Yeah. You have to figure out. And now this holiday season, it's going to look a little different. I think we all understand that. Yeah. But if people do find themselves out of their home and consuming alcohol or drugs, they need to make sure that they find a safe way home or stay where they are. Staying the night's always an option too.
Yeah.
What else do you have for us, Tyler? I think we covered a lot. Is there another message you'd like to get out to our viewers?
I think it's just really important to talk about this season. We all want to have a happy holiday season, and we don't want to ever remember, the Christmas of 2020 is the one where, somebody got arrested for driving impaired, or somebody caused a collision or caused a collision that killed or injured somebody. And we actually partnered with, SGI works with our partners in law enforcement a great deal. And so we asked a number of them to submit videos of them talking about what they want to see out of this holiday season. And some are lighthearted and some are a little bit more serious. And we've got a STARS nurse saying, Dear Santa, I hope this year that we can leave the flying to you and your reindeer. We don't have to respond to any serious collisions. We have a police officer from Prince Albert talking about, if you've had one too many boozy eggnogs. And you have more serious messages as well with a Mountie talking about, hoping that they don't have to knock on somebody's door and deliver the worst news that somebody's ever going to get. Yeah. And, you never want to see that any time of the year. But can you imagine that's a memory that you would always associate with Christmas? I can't imagine something that terrible.
2020's been bad enough. Don't make it worse.
Absolutely.
Plan a safe ride home. Well, impaired driving is the leading cause of death on Saskatchewan's roads. SGI's Be a Good Wingman campaign encourages people to watch out for each other. Remember, when someone is impaired, their judgment is also impaired. Be a friend for life. Don't let impaired friends drive. Tyler, this has been awesome. I appreciate it. And I thank you for the partnership of the program and all the best over the holidays and into 2021.
Well, you guys are doing some great work, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you,
so
Tyler.
much.